Senator Rocky Adams. Senator Chambers Armstrong. Senator Wilson. Representative Bridges. Representative Gordon. Representative Marzian. Co-Chair Lewis.
Here.
Chair West.
Here. We have a quorum. We are duly constituted to conduct business today. First matter on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval of the minutes? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. We do have a short matter of business. Randy, if you would, do you have a matter to bring before the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
The floor is yours.
Rumor has it that we have a member of our staff that has a birthday today. Does anybody know who that would be? It was Friday. Okay, well, I
think that's close enough.
Yeah, hey, for me, that's right on the spot. I mean, well, we're playing horseshoes here, okay? Close is good enough. But Miss Anna has a birthday. I'm not going to ask you to tell your age, but we do want to wish you a very happy birthday, belated Thanksgiving, good Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and everything else that goes along with it. But anyway, you do an excellent job on the staff, and we appreciate you. We don't want you to felt that we were unnoticing you. We love you dearly.
Thank you. I'm going to hide now.
Happy birthday. Senator Adams has a recognition.
Yes, with me today I have Elia, who is shadowing me, and she's from Louisville, and she's finishing up her college career, hopefully on to law school next. But I just hope everyone can make her feel welcome today.
Point of privilege of the chair, we would also like to make another person feel welcome this morning. I believe this may be Senator Casey Chambers Armstrong's first meeting here, I think, where she's been here. Boy, she doesn't know what she's in for. But welcome to the committee. We appreciate you being here, and good luck. Let's make her feel welcome. As is normal, I'll just do the normal announcements right now. If you would like to speak for or against a regulation, please sign up at the back. We think we have all those in already, but just in case, you really do need to sign up at the back. And please silence your cell phones. If you have cell phones with you, please put those on silent. Without further ado, please call the first regulation.
We are going to start with regulations for full review. Education and Labor Cabinet, Education Professionals. Oh, sorry, strike that. We are going to do the informational review first. The first regulation for informational review is Education and Labor Cabinet, Department of Education, 702 KAR 3030.
This regulation establishes requirements for the level of insurance coverage needed for school district buildings and structures.
You know the deal. State your name for the record, then proceed. Before you do get started, I will say, as was stated, this is for informational review only. We had heard from the insurance community some things that were percolating out there in the insurance community, and this is to help the legislature get a better hold on what's happening, especially as it pertains to self-insurance pools. So if you would state your name for the record and proceed.
Good morning, Todd Allen, Deputy Commissioner and General Counsel for the Department of Education.
Matt Ross, Associate Commissioner in the Office of Finance and Operations, Kentucky Department of Education.
Che Ritter, Division Director, Kentucky Department of Education.
Mr. Allen, if you would make sure your microphone's on there, pull it a little bit closer.
Is that better?
Yep.
Very good.
Please proceed.
So as stated, this is the regulation that sets requirements for school districts throughout Kentucky to have insurance on their buildings, specifically the amounts of property coverage that they're required to keep to ensure that they are insured for replacement value. And Senator West, we're happy to answer any questions since this is an informational review. This is our first time doing one of these. Not quite sure exactly what you're looking for, but happy to answer any questions that you or committee members may have.
So you don't know what we're fishing for? Yeah, I can definitely help you out. So as my understanding is out there, when we're talking about insurance for school structures, okay, in the past it was a normal process. Property casualty agent, presents you a policy for consideration. It lists the limits of coverage for each building, and you're covered accordingly with a certain deductible. Okay. My understanding is there are new policies in place out there that allow groups of schools to go into a self-insurance pool to combine risk is combined into the pool. Go into real quickly. First of all, are you aware of this? I'm pretty sure you are. But tell us how those pools work when it comes to coverage and claims as compared with your normal, run-of-the-mill property policy.
You want me to take that? So, Senator, we are aware of what, for lack of a better term, is a risk pool. And first of all, forgive me for butchering any of the language. We're not the insurance specialists. We would rely upon the Department of Insurance to be insurance specialists. We're generally aware of that being a option that exists for some school districts that they have taken advantage of, but it is our understanding from the coverage perspective that those school districts continue to receive declarations that state the amount of coverage that is still the full replacement cost of that building. What we understand to be the difference is in the event of a claim, claims are first paid from a pool of money that is collected from premiums that are collected from those member school districts. And then we also understand that there is a backup policy or policies that once a certain amount of money has been paid out of that pool is the second payer. And that's a more traditional type of insurance policy. Specifics on exactly how that works, we would have to defer to the Department of Insurance on that.
Okay. And we'll get into more questions later. I'm going to open up the floor to members if they have questions, but right now I'm just trying to get our head wrapped around it. Maybe it's my misunderstanding, but I'm hearing a different approach, that it's different than that. My understanding is you have your pool of insurance, and everybody who's in the self-insurance pool for property, that pool has a cap. There's only so much money in the pool.
Right.
And so it's first come, first serve. And so it's really concerning. Let's say you have a tornado in a given area that has a lot of these types of policies. I think the concern is once you go over that overall limit, that it then becomes the full faith and credit of the school district. In other words, so the school district would have to start paying those claims. And it's my understanding is that the insurance policies the liability is joint and several. So whoever's in the pool, once that overall overall limit is reached, now it's a pretty big limit, to reach, but under a catastrophic event, it's not unforeseen that it could happen. But my understanding is once that limit's reached, it's first come, first serve. Whoever's first in to get their claim covered is covered. After that, you're pretty much out of luck, but it is joint and several between the policyholders. And so let's say you bankrupt one of the school districts because they weren't in line. That liability, the other districts are then on the hook for that liability. That's my understanding of it. And so where there seems to be a little bit of disagreement with what you're saying is I'm unaware of a policy that's covering that extra layer, that layer beyond the initial layer. And in the insurance business, you call that reinsurance. So I'm unaware that there's a reinsurance policy covering that layer of risk. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. Tell me where I'm wrong, or if you.
I mean, I think we'd have to look into that and see whether or not that's the case. I mean, obviously we had a different understanding, so
Sure.
we're happy to research that and sort of, I mean, obviously that would be concerning to us if there was ever a situation where a district could be bankrupt because they weren't first in or didn't get their claims covered, and we would. not be in
Gotcha.
favor
I'm
of
going
that.
to switch gears, and I'm going to open up to other members. Do any other members? I'm going to come back in with questions. Any other members have any questions before I? Senator Wilson has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having worked in insurance, you're correct. That is reinsurance, that once you reach a certain level, everything is covered after that by the reinsurance policy. However, the way you have described it, if they reach that limit and there is no reinsurance policy to cover that, they would be obligated to pay for it on their own, the school district itself or Department of Education, whoever is on the hook for that. So you're correct.
Exactly. Any other questions from members? Okay. Coming back, I realize we probably caught you guys kind of flat-footed on this, and go in. The next time we discuss this, we probably need to have the Department of Insurance in as well to give their perspective, because they're kind of the front line, in the weeds kind of guys on that. What I'm going to get into next, the next line of questioning is where you guys come in. So, do you have an oversight role when it comes to compliance? So, as the KDE, I think at the end of the day, you guys are responsible for signing off from a compliance aspect. And where I'm going with this is, if it's how I'm saying it is, how I'm thinking it is, then we're going to me, there's a problem with the bonding component of it. And so our bond companies have to rely on audits. They have to rely on what they're being told is there within the system. They want to know they're covered. They want to know these buildings that the bond applies to are covered if they're destroyed. And so they need to know that, the bondholders do. And so we want to make sure they're appropriately taken care of. And I'm assuming they will have a vested interest in this to make sure that their interest is covered. So could you comment on that, the compliance aspect and the bonding aspect?
So I think that by way of analogy, if your mortgage company requires you to carry insurance on your home, obviously they have an interest in that. You send a proof of insurance coverage to your bank once a year, and they check the box to say that you're covered. But they're not necessarily experts in determining the adequacy, or I shouldn't say adequacy, but the soundness of that insurance company, right? They rely upon the state insurance regulations and state Department of Insurance to do that. So we're in a similar position. Our required annual audits of school districts require that the auditor look at the amounts of coverage, and I'll let Che and Matt talk a little bit more about that, how that comes back to KDE and how we double check on the back end.
Yeah, so just 171 districts, they all fall under an audit contract that we share with independent auditors. And they're essentially looking for material deficiency. And part of that, we checked the most recent audit contract plus the last few, the same statute, same regulations been in there for quite some time to make sure they've got adequate coverage. Now, if they found a material deficiency, that would be addressed in like a finding or some kind of recommendation, or they may even contact us to say, we weren't provided this information. And so we would do a little more digging into that and contact the district.
Thank you so much. I think we're on the same page. You're looking at that overall deck page.
Yes.
That's provided to you guys, and you're signing off on the deck page. The purpose of this committee information hearing and the reason we requested this is we're trying to make sure there's not a ticking time bomb there. Mm-hmm. And the problem doesn't necessarily come with the limits. The problem comes with the language in the insurance contract, especially the joint and several liability component, which is key there. So I think you all have it. Do any other members have additional questions at this time? Seeing none, I just have a request that you would get with DOI and check in with them and make sure that these districts are adequately covered, especially for the bondholders. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. Please call the next regulation.
Also for informational review, Public Protection Cabinet, Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, 804 KAR 13010 emergency, 020 emergency, 030 emergency, and 040 emergency.
804-13-010 emergency establishes the process for enforcement and administration of laws related to tobacco, nicotine, and vapor products. 13020 emergency establishes the form for the tobacco, nicotine, and vapor product license application. 13030 emergency establishes the reasons for which the commissioner shall or may deny an application for a tobacco, nicotine, or vapor product license. And 13040 emergency establishes the process for applying for a transitional tobacco, nicotine, or vapor product license when purchasing a tobacco, nicotine, or vapor product licensed business.
Please state your name for the record. Green light. Make sure your green light's on there.
Here we go.
There you go.
Joshua Newton, I'm General Counsel for ABC.
Chad Thompson, General Counsel for Public Protection Cabinet.
Thank you so much. Once again, this is for information only today. The way we're going to do this is open it up for any initial comments you may have. Then we're going to open it up for questions. Then we have 2 speakers to come in behind you. So that's kind of how it will flow. Do you have like an initial statement on anything, or you just want us to
You can just go
drive with questions? Okay. Co-Chair Lewis is going to start us off with some questions.
First of all, I very much appreciate you all coming, especially on short notice. As my co-chair stated, this is an informational review only. We have been hearing from stakeholders that do have concerns. If it's all right with the co-chair, we might let them present first and then circle back.
Okay, that'll be fine. If you guys don't mind stepping to the side, we'll bring them up, let them speak, and then we'll bring you back at the end to comment on whatever they have to say. So the 2 people that want to speak, we have Shannon Stiglitz and Brian Clark, if you guys want to move to the table. She's been here before. She knows about the green light. Whenever you guys are settled, just, you know the deal, state your name for the record, and you're free to take off.
Yes. Shannon Stiglitz, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for the Kentucky Retail Federation. And we thank you for this opportunity to participate in this new process of informational review for regulations, particularly when we're talking about emergency regulations that are in effect. In this case, Senate Bill 100 that was adopted in the 2025 General Assembly required licensing of tobacco, nicotine, and vape businesses. That was, many states do that. I will say the Retail Federation has had resisted the requiring a license as in the past. But as new products and vapes and as policymakers became trying to figure out how to properly regulate these businesses, our folks wanting to fully comply with the law, it became seen as an opportunity to have a way of regulating this lawful product. With that being said, our concerns on these regulations are not the requirement of a tobacco license necessarily. It is it can be encapsulated in a couple of things: the process by which they are going through to get that license, the requirements or causes for denial of a license, and the concerns of maybe some confusion about what a transitional license is and the requirements of it. So I just wanted to give you that broad overview. But when I think that it's important to understand that if you are currently licensed with the ABC to sell wine, spirits, or malt beverages, When you apply for that license, you check a box that you are a tobacco license, that you sell tobacco. We are seeing that the requirements for a license are being treated similarly to and a duplication of effort of an alcohol license. And we do not see the two as one and the same. We see these as two separate businesses. So, for example, 020 is the application and license form. You have to submit a lease. I will say that the commissioner has graciously worked with us and said, well, we just need to we need these 3 or 4 pieces of information. You have to submit all employee attestations that they have completed the tobacco control training. Tobacco control training has been in statute for several years. I'm not going to go back exactly how many. And the statute today states that those employee attestations that they've been trained on, you don't sell to minors, you don't sell illegal products, have to be kept on site for inspection. At first, when this application process was being rolled out, it was becoming quite cumbersome with the number and volume of data that was being required. I commend ABC for working with us in some respects on trying to get this done. I think what is concerning primarily at this moment is we are staring down the barrel of January 1. And there are 7,000 businesses that have to be licensed by January 1. What we don't know or clearly understand is, one, what do we do if retail businesses have applied for a license prior to the January 1 deadline, but it is not issued? I can tell you for certain that 99% of the retailers that I work with will not sell products without that license, particularly since it's within ABC. It risks other licenses, and that is just not a risk worth taking. So we hope that we can come up with an immediate solution for that. Longer term, looking at the policy concerns, from our perspective, the K-804-13030, the causes for denial of a license. If you look at that license, that reg, it's broken up into 2 pieces: why the commissioner must deny a license and why the discretion of the commissioner to deny a license. If you look at the why they shall deny a license piece, it says for any activities that could cause revocation of a license, but it doesn't opine on what those activities are. And so the commissioner must deny a license for activities that could cause revocation or that could lead to revocation of a license, but we don't know necessarily what those activities are. Secondly, in the section on that is in the discretion of the commissioner, if you read it, it really could be the commissioner has any discretion that is sound reasoning, sound discretion. An ABC commissioner in the future, if this reg passes as is, could decide we're not going to allow for the sale of any nicotine-based products because, for example, the American Cancer Society has said they have caused cancer, so I, as commissioner, will deny every ABC license. That is probably hyperbolic. You can say that to me. I understand. But that is a reality of the way this regulation is structured and a cause for great concern for businesses. I understand that when you look at alcohol, you might not consider that an essential business. I think it was considered essential during COVID. But if you look at businesses, those 7,000 businesses that are selling these products, we're talking grocery stores, gas stations, pharmacies. Of course, you have vape and tobacco shops. But they are not pure alcohol businesses and should not be treated as such. In their licensing, in the reasons you deny a license, if you look at the discretionary pieces, they could deny a license because someone in the public complains. They could deny a license based on potential growth. I'm not even sure I know what that means. Based on financial impact in the community. These are things that I think that alcohol businesses are traditionally know and understand what they mean. Tobacco is different. And I think these regulations demonstrate that we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole and treat everyone the same. Finally, I will say that, and that goes for the process as well. Tobacco, by federal law, it has to be kept. You see it behind the counter. That's not because that's where it's good for marketing purpose. That's where the law requires it to be. It has to be locked up. It has to be behind the counter. It has to be out of the reach of minors. Retailers have a responsibility to ensure that happens. Yet we're making retailers take pictures of their entire store, every corner, all four corners of a store, and the outside of the location in order to get the license. These things are going to slow the process down. And again, we have holidays, maybe less than 10 business days to get these issued. I know the department is working ferociously to do this. They have taken some extreme steps to work for it. But I think we need a solution for what happens if it doesn't happen, because the risks are too great for our retail businesses. There's some other confusing things. There is a 040 is the regulation that is purely on the transitional license, yet 020, which is the licensing applications, lists and talks about the transitional license and the need for advertisement. We sort of don't understand why we're conflating the two in there, and I'll give Brian the opportunity to speak. I didn't forget he was here. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Shannon. Please state your name for the record.
My name's
And Shannon has allowed you to proceed.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Brian Clark. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Petroleum Marketers Association, and I'm here today on behalf of our retail members across the state. Collectively with Ms. Stiglitz, we represent all of the retail associations in Kentucky, and we stand with our retail partners on this matter. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just got a brief statement. For sake of time today, I'd like to just communicate that there are both concerns and issues with the proposed regulations and the e-regs that have been filed. The regs assert or add additional requirements that are not required by state or federal law as part of the application process for the sale of lawful tobacco and vape products by Kentucky retailers. Additionally, while some retailers are or have worked to comply and get through the process, we've been made aware that as issues and questions have arisen, the subsequent instructions for compliance have varied and been on a case-by-case basis, which have not been uniformly shared to all the retailers. Upon the initial communication received to the public notice of the regulations, there was confusion. The process has been cumbersome, requiring duplicative information that for almost all of our members already is on file and resides within the department, as it is required for their existing packaged beer licenses. And even on that application, they indicate, as Shannon said, that they are a tobacco retailer. Again, it's been a cumbersome process to implement and one that's time-consuming, especially for existing retailers with multiple locations and even our smallest retailers. We genuinely appreciate the work of the department, but the timeline that getting us to this date raises concern, both with substantive requirements set forth in the e-regs and regular regulations, including items being required as part of the application process incorporated by reference. Again, these are requirements that are in statute and apply to alcohol licensure, but do not have statutory basis or apply to the sale of lawful tobacco products and should not be treated as such. Additionally, there appear to be drafting errors in the filed regulations. The timing constraints to be licensed by a January 1 deadline are also a concern. Industry received notice the first week of November, and then comments are not even due on these until December 31st, and for which we will be filing detailed formal comments. While we have heard that the department has shared to some of the retailers they would not enforce come January 1, these regs are in effect and would have the force of law. We would humbly request that the department pull back these e-regulations and correct the regulations, remove duplicative requirements, remove the requirements from being asserted that are not required by law, and either create or bifurcate the appropriate different application processes and instructions for an initial new business application for licensure versus an existing retailer and the transitional license for the purchase of an existing business, for example. Then proceed with regular regulations that would afford Kentucky retailers time for implementation while giving retailers time for compliance. Or consider an advance issuance of licenses to all existing retailers and then determine issues or items that are needed prior to their annual renewal date for the said license. There has to be a more organized and better way to coordinate with legitimate businesses acting in good faith. Please let me be clear, on behalf of our industry members, we're not pushing back on the requirement to obtain licensure. This is about the rough launch and the attempt to add additional requirements not specified in law for the sale of these lawful products, going beyond both state and federal legal requirements, as well as the deployment of these regs, the instructions, and the communication with industry on them, or lack thereof, and the timeline for filing these regs to afford compliance within a reasonable timeline under this process. Thank you again for the opportunity to be heard. We hope the department will be willing to work and talk with us on these regulations going forward. We do appreciate their efforts, but some pause or reset or correction on this is needed. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for the excellent presentation. We are going to open you two up for questions right here. Co-Chair Lewis has a question.
First of all, Brian and Shannon, thank you also for coming here today. I know it's on short notice. Again, as we work through the ordinary process, we are in public comment period right now, and I suspect there could be some changes should the agency go that route. That being said, have either of your organizations had any conversations directly with ABC in terms of the E-reg or possibly any potential changes that could be made there?
We have communicated with, especially early on, there were a number of questions that came out about running ads in local papers, and this was a great deal of confusion right at the very beginning. We got some clarification that we have communicated to our members to that effect, but that therein, that very example is one of our concerns, is that was communicated to us and we communicated to our members, but it's not being uniformly communicated to all retailers that are affected. We've had additional questions we've asked, and some of the responses have been responded to, and then some have said, because we're in the comment period, you know, that's best discussed with legal. So it's awkward in that respect. It's been a little, we've been trying to just figure out the way to proceed here, where it's in comment period, and we will be filing comments, but at the same time, it's in effect. Shannon, I'll be.
Yes, we have had conversations with the Public Protection Cabinet as well as ABC about our concerns. Initially, you know, and they told us, please file your comments, especially on the more substantive sort of policy issues. But in addition to that, we have asked sort of retail application specific questions. At first, that was difficult to get answers to, I will be honest. But Brian is right. I might have a very large retailer that is being given information that, you know, please don't submit your all 800 pages of your original 30-year lease. But what I had asked for, we had a call with them Friday and a member, and subsequent to that call, I asked them to provide sort of the tricks and of getting this application process to go smoother in written guidance. And then, of course, we will follow up on our formal, but I have not received anything back if we will be getting that. I just don't think that I'm going to go to one of my retailers and say, well, ABC has told me that just sign one piece of paper for all your employees and that will work, when what the application process actually says is X. I need some official communications from the agency in order for my members to continue.
Thank you. One comment, Chair.
Please proceed.
I guess we're going to have growing pains in all of this as we, implement this in Kentucky. I guess my biggest concern is the comment period ends at the end of December. It goes into effect January 1. We're 17 days away. They're going to have to process all these claims during that time. I own businesses myself and have a lot of regulatory pressures, so I completely understand where you're coming from. So my biggest concern is us finding a solution, at least in the short term, and get it to where everybody's operating legally come January 1. Thank you.
Any other members? Representative Marzian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question or clarification. So this is information only today, so these regs will not move forward. Will then you all just operate from what you've done in the past for January 1? Because if they don't move today, they won't move until January. If that's correct, Steph.
Correct me if I'm wrong, trying to answer her question. Sorry to get in the middle. But I believe there's existing emergency regs. So in other words, the ordinary is in process, but while that's in process, the emergency reg is there now.
Oh.
So that's what we're talking about is the effective emergency regulation. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
That does, and it kind of sounds like a mess, but thank you.
Well, this is Administrative Regs Committee, so that's what we handle. Any other questions from members? Representative Bridges acts like he has a question.
I'm not for sure if it goes to this group or goes to the cabinet, but I've heard the word duplications a lot. So when you turn in information they've already got, and I'm just throwing it out there, so I don't know who needs to answer that, but can the files they already have be considered for these applications, or do they have to provide additional ones?
What we've been told is this is a separate license, a separate system, and everything has to be resubmitted that is current for that date.
Okay. Follow up.
Please
Mr.
proceed.
Chair. Brian, you and I know each other. And for the cabinet's information, I used to have 10 convenience stores and truck stops, so I'm familiar with this and the licensing and everything. But I'll make more of a statement than anything. For an emergency reg to go into effect in 17 days, and the comment period ends, and the next day it goes into effect, I don't see how it's reasonably possible that this could go forward and not hurt businesses. And I mean, right now I know the majority on the General Assembly, both, I believe I can speak for the House and Senate, we are focusing on economic development, businesses, and the health of our businesses that are currently operating. And I just feel like this is going to be very damaging. So I'd like some explanation, I guess, from the cabinet on how this can go forward without disturbing these existing businesses.
They'll be coming back up shortly. Any other questions?
If I may respond to the representative.
Please proceed.
Thank you for that, Representative Bridges. We kind of feel like they're not ready for prime time yet, that we can probably get this process right. And it's because it's a difficult process for those existing retailers. And to Shannon's point, if they don't have a license, they're not going to sell a product. If they don't sell a product, we're not collecting taxes for the state. So there's revenue issues there too. So I think where we're just looking for here is take a pause or a reset or whatever is necessary to do it correctly.
Thank you so much. Seeing no further questions, I'm going to ask the cabinet. Thank you. I'm going to ask the cabinet to come back up and before we ask you guys any questions, we'll give you ample opportunity to respond and talk about what's happening specifically.
Again, I'm Joshua Newton, General Counsel for ABC. I don't have any broad comments. I'm happy to take questions. I will say that the there's been discussion as if the emergency regs are going into effect in January. They are in effect now, and they are in effect now so that people can have licenses by January 1st, because without that, we have no way of knowing, without these applications, without people reaching out to us, we don't know who all will need licenses. We can't just issue licenses without applications. Also, I will say that under Section 4 of the bill, the unlicensed sale is, under the bill, you have to have a license to sell as of January 1st. That is statutory. That is not something that we are not a requirement we're putting on anyone. That is a requirement under statute. Also under statute, the penalty for that is criminal. It is, which makes sense because if you don't have a license, we can't really do a whole lot as far as taking your license away. The penalty is the same as unlicensed sale of alcohol. It literally refers to the alcohol statute. So whether or not prosecution happens because of that is not entirely on us. We would be able to refer people to a county attorney, but a county attorney could prosecute this on their own. As far as what we're doing, everything we're doing is trying to help business to comply with the statute and help us to make sure that the people who are selling are the people are responsible.
Did you?
I would just add that, as I think, and again, Chad Thompson, General Counsel for the Public Protection Cabinet, as was discussed, we are still within the public comment period for these regs. Certainly welcome public comments on these regs. I think that is what the process is for. And there were a couple of things I think mentioned, specific language within the regs. If there are comments on ways we can improve or refine the language of the regs, I cannot sit here at the table and guarantee we will accept every comment that is submitted, but I can sit here and say that we will thoughtfully consider every comment that is submitted, and if we think changes need to be made, we're not opposed to making those changes at all to help businesses come into compliance. And to my colleague's point, I think the January 1 issue is not something we inserted in the reg. Section 4 of the reg says you shall have a license to sell these products, and that particular section of the reg is effective January 1. So reading those two things together, I think we were trying to get regulations promulgated that would, as my colleague said, allow businesses to come into compliance by that statutory date, and that's been our effort all along.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open the floor up for questions. I'll start us out. You answered my first question before we started. So my first question was going to be, why the emergency regulation? Why is it necessary when the date was January 1? And that makes sense. You want to get information flowing in the door, right? So my second question was, the drafter, the sponsor of the bill, deliberately put in a delayed implementation date. So we passed this last session. Session ends in March, April, and usually those would go into effect June 30th, any statute that we pass. But he delayed implementation to January 1, 2026. Why were we not starting on emergency regs and processing maybe in April, May of 2025? Like, why are we up against the clock now? Am I missing something there on the date?
I think
we have nobody currently licensed, right? So
we actually have, as of this morning, issued, it looks like 839 licenses. Okay. So we are, as soon as those e-regs were filed on October 31st, we endeavored to, I think that was a Friday, I think our licensing portal opened the very following Monday, November 3rd. We have been accepting and processing applications since that time. 839, I think that was as of about 10:30 this morning, had been issued. To your question, I think we were working behind the scenes to try and get regulations prepared.
You're saying it took you 3 or 4 months with in-house to come up with the regulations?
I think in reviewing a bill, not an insubstantial bill, I would say, that required an entirely new licensing structure. reviewing, analyzing that bill, coming up with a concept of
Yeah.
licensing structure that would make sense, reducing that to paper and getting it filed. Yes, it just took a little bit of time for us to do that. But we weren't intentionally delaying by any means. We were working towards getting these regulations drafted, prepared, filed. It just wasn't a snap of the finger process, unfortunately.
Thank you. Senator Chambers Armstrong has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was curious, you said you've issued 830-something licenses. How many applications have you had come in? I'm just curious what the backlog is.
Total, I think, and these numbers are as of 10:30 this morning, and I'm doing some quick math with about 2,500 licenses, I would say.
So you've granted about a third of those that have, or a quarter, depending on how we're doing the math. What's the average time? I know you're probably just pulling this out of your brain, but from the time someone submits it until they get a decision on their application, can you tell me roughly how long? Like if somebody submitted today, what's the likelihood that they're going to know by January 1st whether or not their application's been approved?
Generally speaking, to my knowledge, they can be turned around in a day if they have all of this, or less than a day if they have if they have all of the documentation they need to provide. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Co-Chair Lewis.
A couple questions, Chairman, if you'll indulge me.
Please proceed.
So we have 839 approved. Again, I checked my calendar. We got 17 days until January 1st. How are we going to process all those guys?
We have been working diligently to get through them. I know that ABC staff came in over the weekend to try and continue working on these licenses. I think that is something that ABC staff is going to continue doing moving forward through the end of the year to try and process these as quickly as possible. So I think rolling up our sleeves and trying to get the work done.
Right. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that you all are putting in on that. I have one other question and a comment. I'll be brief. I know my colleagues also have other questions. So, again, in this committee, we try to work things together. Everybody work together. Of course, you know, you have the agency who has a task to do, and you got stakeholders, and I understand the frustrations that come with that. I am concerned about the short period of time. Again, long term, if we need to tweak things down the line, we can go through the ordinary process. But I guess what I want to get to is just looking at both the ordinary and the emergency regulation. I see there being a lot of pushback, and I see there being bases for deficiency. Again, this was filed November 5th. You've had all year. I know the bill calls for it to be implemented by January 1. 13A.190, an agency's finding of emergency shall not be based on the agency's failure to timely process and file administrative regulations through the ordinary administrative regulation process. Again, though you all have had a lot of stuff going on, I know this is a big undertaking. Ideally, it would be deficient on the emergency side. Should have been filed 4 months ago. This is an informational review in the vein of trying to get everybody working together. I'd like to see if we can't work out something. Maybe it's a provisional license if they've applied, and at least while you all are reviewing their documentation, if they'll be considered legal. Or maybe we look at grandfathering existing in for 3 months. I don't know. You all know the source material better than me, but whenever this does come up again on the ordinary side, whether that's January, whether that's February, in the vein of working together, I hope we can work out something. And again, an E-reg, you can change it any time. Let's get through the first part of the year. Put the minds of ease of our small business owners across the state, and try to work together. But I appreciate what you're trying to do. I know it's an undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to respond?
Yeah, if I may.
Sure.
We would be happy to work with the legislature on some sort of solution here. We cannot create licenses under this. We can't create a provisional license under statutory authority we're given. We are set with what licenses that we can issue by the statute. So
I can't speak for the co-chair, but I think he was maybe talking about some legislation or something to allow a provisional license. But
yeah, I was just
totally understand what you're saying. Yes, you can't make a provisional license out of whole cloth, right?
And I think
are you saying you can't write? Is the cabinet saying that you can't write laws? For the record. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I was more just saying that we can't enlarge, we can't restrict, we can't we are set with what powers we are given by the statute, and so it was brought up the request for a lease. Leases are something that we request in the alcohol context because there's a specific statutory requirement. We request them in this context because we're licensing premises in this as well, and we don't want to license a premises that someone doesn't own or someone doesn't have a leasehold on, because there can be a lot of confusion that comes up from that. Especially considering our investigators have the right to enter into any premises that is selling these products, and we don't want to.
Yeah, and you get into constitutional issues there for sure.
We want to make sure that the documentation's there for that. It's not a superfluous. We're not trying to just gun things up. We're trying to streamline things.
Gotcha. Co-Chair Lewis, I think, had one more question.
One more follow-up. It was said, I forget who it was that said it, but somebody implied that the agency would not be enforcing these towards the beginning of the year, whether that's official or unofficial policy. Is there anything that we could put in a change in the E-reg on that front that maybe might give some retailers assurances to give them time?
Again, the statute says that January 1st
Understand.
is when, so we couldn't put anything. That would be struck down, I would imagine, pretty quickly if we tried to do that.
So you don't want to put the fact that you're not going to enforce the law in writing?
Yeah, I think the January 1 date is again a function of the way Section 4 becomes effective under the language of the bill. So absolutely, as stated here, willing to work with the legislature, willing to work with industry partners on trying to come up with a solution to this. I just think we're limited on that January 1 date with what we can do in reg because that's a function of the statute rather than the reg.
Got it. I think we've got a lot of information here. I'm going to open it up for questions, then I'm going to end us with one final question. Representative Bridges has a question.
Yeah, I guess my question is, a lot of these already have tobacco license, and they've got alcohol license, and you're holding license of these locations. Is that correct?
They don't have tobacco license issued by the state. If they have tobacco licenses, then only so far 839 as of 10 o'clock this morning, 10:30 this morning. Tobacco licenses have been issued to 839.
Yeah, but you already do tobacco endorsements, correct?
We do. We have not had tobacco licenses before.
You've never had. Okay.
No, this is new. This is new.
But you do have other licenses on these businesses already through alcohol or whatever. My question is, why can't you cross-reference those when you've already got quite a bit of the information already in your process to expedite this process?
A couple of things. One, well, first, I don't do a lot of the back end stuff for our online portal, so I couldn't tell you why those sorts of things. However, not every alcohol seller sells tobacco, and not every tobacco seller sells alcohol. And again, we have no way of knowing. Actually, I don't know if I've said this. We have no way of knowing what people out there, what businesses out there are selling tobacco until they apply for a license, because we haven't licensed them before. There are local
Did you mean
licenses.
vaping? You said tobacco. Did you mean
tobacco as well as vaping? We don't.
But sorry to interrupt. But when an alcohol license comes in, it's my understanding that there is a checkbox for tobacco, right?
Yes.
So at that point, you do know.
Yes.
This business does sell tobacco.
We know those businesses do, but we don't
Right.
know the universe of businesses out there that would need them, and also don't know how to reach them. We did what we could to try to reach, what businesses are out there, but we have no way of knowing what all businesses. So,
I guess my point is, for those that you do, why can't you cross-reference that and make some allowances because you've already got license with them and you've got a majority of this information already in your portal?
Again, I don't know. I don't do the back end work on our online portal, so I couldn't tell you.
Could that quick question.
Please
I'll make
proceed.
this quick. Could that be, I mean, I believe that's something that could be put in the regulation to allow that cross-reference for this licensing. I don't think it's going to conflict with the current statute or the current requirements, and it would make it much easier for those retailers already in your system.
Right.
And I guess that's probably a suggestion of mine, allow the cross-referencing to expedite the problem, to make it easier on these businesses. Because we want Kentucky to be open for business. We don't make it more difficult for them to do business. So I think that would be a common sense procedure. And if there's other departments, cabinets within our state that these businesses are doing business with, and they've got that information, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to cross-reference with those also, to take some of the burden off the businesses. Because you're saying 2,500, but I saw a number down here, 7,000 retailers. So we're still missing 45 or 5,500 people, or 4,500 people here that is possibly out there that has to be licensed by January 1. So we don't have just a third of them licensed. We've got a small portion that are licensed if it ends up being 7,000. So that's my concern, is expediency, and it seems like we've lost a lot of time already. But I do appreciate what you're doing, and I was just in the business, and I know what it's like to get these letters saying you've got to do X, Y, and Z, and you said, well, I've already done that in other areas. Why do I have to do it again? And it would make it much more efficient, both for you and for the retailers. So just a suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please proceed.
If I may, I would say that the way we have structured the regulation for renewals, we have built it in a way where existing alcohol licensees can get on that same renewal cycle with their tobacco licenses to try and reduce that burden and make it a one-time process rather than a two-step process for these separate licenses. I think the impediment there for the initial round of licensure was, again, this January 1 date built into the statute. Everyone had to have a license by then. So for that initial round, we felt we needed to get original submissions in from all of those interested in selling, but we did try to build into the regulation and the renewal process within the regulation a way that could be streamlined and done in one setting rather than two.
Great.
And those people would still need to apply for a license. Just because they say that they sell tobacco doesn't mean that they necessarily want a license. We can't force a license on them. They would still need to give us the information that they want them, and they would also have to pay for it. So,
right, exactly. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, I'll finish this segment up pretty quickly. I think, to sum up, Mrs. Stiglitz was talking about the process and everything. I think the main issue is you guys are used to regulating alcohol, and so you have your normal ABC steps for alcohol, and vapes are not alcohol. They're two completely different products, and I totally understand your all side of it. Let's try to use a system we already know, we already have in place. That makes total sense. But I think the problem comes in, if we can make the vaping regulation as simple as possible, then maybe that would, more simple than it already is, than your initial rollout, then that would speed up the process and help that. So who knows, there may be a technical cleanup bill, I don't know, that deals with this kind of stuff, and maybe some of these issues can get worked out. But we really appreciate you being here and answering these questions. We understand that it's difficult sometimes for the cabinets to implement what the legislature tells them to do. So in a timely manner, it's very tough, especially if you got 7,000 people. It's very difficult. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I'm going to call an audible here. We're going to do, in the interest of time, the committee will stand at ease. Where's Matt? Julie's got a question on Medicaid services. She said she had to leave. Get Vaughn. Okay, sorry about that. Please call the next regulation. We are following the order in your book, the original order.
Now regulations for full review. Education and Labor Cabinet, Education Professional Standards Board, 16 KAR 2020. This regulation has staff suggested amendments.
16 KAR 2020 removes references to the Kentucky Community and Technical College System and the Kentucky Teacher Internship Program for consistency with Senate Bill 265 from the 2024 regular session, requires a candidate who receives a one-year provisional certificate to enroll in KDE's New Teacher Institute, requires KDE's recommendation for renewal of provisional certificates based on progress in or completion of the New Teacher Institute program, grandfathers in candidates with a certificate if admitted to an approved occupation-based educator preparation program prior to July 1, 2018, and exempts candidates seeking occupation-based certification in HVAC, plumbing, and electricity who have a current Kentucky master level certification from being required to obtain an associate's degree. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please state your name for the record? Green light.
Try that again.
Yeah, there you go.
Good afternoon. Cassie Trueblood, counsel for the EPSB.
Lauren Graves, Policy Advisor, KDE Office of Career and Technical Education.
Carmela Clark, Occupation-Based Certification for the Office of Career and Technical Education.
Thank you so much. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion. We have a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Do we have any questions from members of the subcommittee on this regulation, set of regulations? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Personnel Cabinet, 101 KAR 2210 Emergency and 2210 Ordinary.
This package amends material incorporated by reference, the 2026 Kentucky Employees Health Plan Benefit Selection Guide, to increase the deductible and maximum out-of-pocket amounts in all plans, add a copay of $250 for the emergency room facility benefit for most health plans, increase the maximum amount allowed in a healthcare flexible spending savings account, FSA, and the maximum carryover amount allowed, increase the maximum amount allowed in a child and adult daycare, FSA, and increase the percentage paid towards the GLP-1 weight loss drug for some plans. The 2025 guide remains in effect until January 1st, 2026.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Good afternoon. Chris Chamness, Commissioner of the Department of Employee Insurance.
Will Adams, Counsel to the Department.
Thank you so much. We have no amendments, staff amendments, or agency amendments on this. Any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Commission on Human Rights, 104 KAR 1010 Emergency.
104 KAR 1010E amends material incorporated by reference in response to a letter received from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, to remove logos, marks, or names that are identical or similar to the official HUD seal and remove all references to HUD.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. Colt Sells, Counsel for the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights.
Thank you so much. There are no amendments to this regulation. Any questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Finance and Administration Cabinet, 200 KAR 5021. This regulation has staff suggested amendments.
200 KAR 5021, as initially filed, amended material incorporated by reference to update and consolidate defined terms, clarify contract language that is legally prohibited, emphasize the Commonwealth's transition to primarily electronic procurement methods, clarify existing processes, and make technical, grammatical, and formatting updates. The amended after comments version further amends material incorporated by reference to amend the sponsorship policy to distinguish the sponsorship guidelines applicable to agencies that are governmental in focus providing essential services for the direct benefit of the public, and agencies that have proprietary functions. Clarify that written communications regarding payment issues should be directed to vendor representatives identified in contract. Remove deadlines not explicitly supported by statutory authority. Remove penalties not explicitly supported by statutory authority. Clarify that a contractor shall be copied on all communications regarding the dispute process. And clarify that the agency buyer of record issuing a modification holds authority to approve contract modifications. The staff suggested amendment amends sections 1 and 2 to comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Thank you. Carrie Bishop, Assistant General Counsel, Finance Administration Cabinet.
Thank you. Barbara Dickens, General Counsel of the Finance and Administration Cabinet.
Thank you. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. Any questions for the Finance Cabinet on this set of regs? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Boards and commissions. Board of Dentistry, 201 KAR 8563. This regulation has staff suggested amendments.
2018563, as initially filed, amends provisions for licensure of dental hygienists to remove the application notarization requirements, clarify specific scope of practice services, increase continuing education public health credit requirements from 3 to 6 and total hours from 6 to 9, and update incorporated material. The amended after comments version amends various sections to make drafting and formatting corrections, and amends Section 14, subsection 6 to delete payment provisions for public health registered dental hygienists. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Yes. Good afternoon. Jeff Allen, Executive Director, Board of Dentistry.
Thank you so much. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. Any questions for members, from members for the Board of Dentistry? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Board of Speech Language Pathology and Audiology, 201 KAR 17120. This regulation has staff suggested amendments.
201 KR 17120 amends to update compact rules as required by statute, amends Section 2 to include, or the staff amendment amends Section 2 to include the latest versions of the rules on data system reporting requirements and on the implementation of the criminal background check requirement.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Sarah Janes, and I'm Board Counsel for the Board of Speech Language Pathology and Audiology.
I'm Sierra Sherwood. I'm an SLPA board member.
Thank you so much. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendment? We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Without objection, so ordered. Any questions from members on this set of regs? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Board of Physical Therapy, 201 KAR 22045. This regulation has staff suggested amendments.
201 KR 2245 amends to add that a credential holder may earn free continued competency credit by completing the Healthcare Regulatory Research Institute's Healthy Practice Resource modules for a maximum of 6 contact hours in the biennium. The staff amendment amends various sections to and incorporated material to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Stephen Curley, Executive Director for the Kentucky Board of Physical Therapy.
Thank you. There is a staff amendment. Do we have a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second over there. Thank you. Without objection, it is so ordered. Any questions from members for the Board of Physical Therapy? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board of Examiners of Psychology, 201 KAR 26118 Emergency.
201 KR 26118 Emergency incorporates by reference the rules adopted by the Psychology Compact administrators and the bylaws.
If you would please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. Mark Bringelman, contract.
If you make sure that green light's on there.
Good afternoon. Mark Bringelman as contract counsel to the board.
Thank you. There are no amendments. Do we have any questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board of Emergency Medical Services, 202 KAR 7555 and 7801. Regulation 7555 has staff suggested amendments.
202 KR 7555 requires a vehicle ad application to be completed within 5 business days of an unlicensed vehicle being placed into operation for medical care and transport, requires national comprehensive criminal background checks for employees or volunteers who staff a vehicle of a licensed agency, requires completion of driver's training prior to operating a board licensed vehicle during an emergency response or when transporting a patient, prohibits off-duty emergency medical personnel from providing care that would require an agency license, modifies dispatch service agreement requirements, and adds provisions for surrendering an agency's license. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and incorporates a new application referenced in the administrative regulation. 202 KR 7801 adds new requirements for the certification, issuance, and renewal of an agency medical director, associate medical director, EMS TEI primary medical director, and EMS TEI associate medical director, and states their responsibilities. The reg also clarifies when certifications expire, requires public notice of negative action taken on certifications, and incorporates the EMS medical director application by reference.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Eddie Sloan, Kentucky Board of EMS.
John Wood, outside counsel for the Board of EMS.
Thank you so much. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. We have one comment, and I'm going to have a question. Co-Chair Lewis has a comment.
Eddie, I missed you last time. I just wanted to thank you for coming in on the last informational review regarding the mamba bite. But
thank you, sir. Thank you.
We cover it all here in this committee, for sure. There was one in the summary review. It's a list of things, right, that she just read. But the one thing that jumped out at me, I'm hoping this is wrong, but maybe it isn't, is Section 2 prohibits off-duty emergency medical personnel from providing off-duty care that would require an agency license. So I'm hoping this isn't a situation, you're probably going to tell me it's not, but I'm hoping this isn't a situation where you have off-duty personnel, there's a true emergency, they're trying to give life-saving care. This in no way prohibits them from responding to that situation, correct?
It would not. No, this is to avoid freelancing by some EMS personnel, right, and most specifically addressing, there's an event medicine classification, so to avoid people skirting the event medicine requirements.
But if they're off duty at the basketball game and someone has a problem, they're still able to take care of them.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet, Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, 301 KAR 3015. This regulation has agency and staff suggested amendments.
301 KAR 3015 deletes unnecessary definitions, adds requirements and exceptions for operating a device that propels a projectile on a shooting range, requires a club or organization on a club operating shooting range to submit reporting information to the department pursuant to 301 KR 3010, and deletes requirements related to equipment used on an archery and crossbow range. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A, and the agency amendment amends Section 2 to clarify that individuals with specific permits are not subject to duplicative requirements and fees.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Jenny Gilbert, Legislative Liaison.
Thank you so much. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendment? There's a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. There's also an agency amendment. Are there any questions or discussion on the agency amendment? Seeing no discussion, is there a motion for approval of the agency amendment? We have a motion. Also have a second. Without objection is so ordered. I'd like to note for the record that is Senator Chambers Armstrong's first action as a member of the.
Thank you.
She's made the big time. So it would not be administrative regs without the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Do we have any questions from members on these regulations? Seeing Co-Chair Lewis has a question.
It's not drones this month.
No.
So when we're talking about operating a device that propels a projectile on a shooting range, are we talking clay pigeons? What are we specifically talking about?
Bullets.
Bullets, okay. Gotcha.
Yes, or arrows beyond our archery ranges.
Okay. What, just 10,000-foot view, what changes were made?
This is really based on the CPI regs that already went through, and part of that was that we created a license to use these ranges. Now, if you have a fishing license or a hunting license, you can use the range for free. We want that. But we also want to track the usage. So we had no mechanism to quantify any of the data when people would ask us, well, how many ranges do you have and how many people are going to these ranges on a weekly basis? What's the safety numbers? Are you having enforcement issues? That kind of thing. So this hopefully will give us at the department some data to start collecting and then watching where is that usage, and then is it by license holders or is it by people who are just really involved in shooting sports but don't necessarily fish or hunt? Because shooting sports is a growing industry and activity right now across the nation. So we're just trying to take some of that, those questions, and then add data to it so that we can better inform our users, but then also to reach the people who are coming to those properties to use the area. And also it would help us on a safety and enforcement issue, because we do sometimes have those complaints.
I like it. Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, Department of Corrections, 501 KAR 16310.
This regulation amends to expand the types of records that are reviewed prior to an execution, allow the condemned person and interested third parties to submit records indicating an intellectual disability, and require a suspension of an execution if the department discovers a diagnosis or specific signs of an intellectual disability during the pre-execution medical actions.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes, Ann Blaylock, General Counsel, Justice and Public Safety Cabinet.
Good afternoon, Nathan Goins with the Cabinet Council.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from members? Senator Chambers Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. I'm new to this committee, but I was reviewing the meeting materials and I saw a letter from the Public Defender's Office noting some of their concerns. Maybe there's someone from that office who's going to speak, but noting some of their concerns about constitutionality and listing sort of specific changes that they thought that they needed to see in this regulation to ensure that it was constitutionally compliant. And those seem like very specific things, like different definitions of insanity, allowing records to be perused, not just for actual diagnoses of intellectual disabilities, but also for terminology related to intellectual disabilities. Could you tell me, have you reviewed that letter and what is your reaction to it?
Yes, Senator Chambers Armstrong. So let's just take a step back first. The reason why we promulgated these regulations was as a result of a Franklin Circuit Court order from April 21st of 2025. And in that order, the court specifically voided out the regulation. And the language that the court used was, it was being done because the current regulation allows for DOC to ignore records outside of a condemned inmate's prison, non-medical records, indicating an intellectual disability in violation of the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, and then goes on to void out the regulations. So the reason why new regulations were promulgated was because of this specific court order. This specific court order only voided out our regulations because of concerns about how we handled intellectual disability. while this case has been going on since 2010, the court didn't make any orders and did not void out our regulation because of insanity. So the new regulation that has been promulgated is specifically in response to that court order. And that's why it focuses on intellectual disability and not on insanity. Well, when you're looking at the regulation itself, there are portions that are underlined related to insanity. That's just because the language is being moved around. That's not new language related to insanity, except for one provision in section 3.1. So then when we go to the letter in relation to the DPA letter and intellectual disability, the first point that they make in their letter is that it doesn't require DOC to take into account documentation submitted by the condemned person's counsel or a third party. But that is just an inaccurate reading of the regulation. If you look at the regulation itself, what DPA is arguing is that if you go to Section 5, which is the submission of records by the condemned person and interested third party, in subsection 3, it states how interested third parties can submit records to the department, but it doesn't have an explicit statement that DOC shall review those records. But that's not necessary in that subsection, because if you go back to the prior subsection, which is section 4, subsection 2, the regulation explicitly states that the psychologist shall also review any records submitted by the condemned person and interested third parties. So we have in the regulation the thing that DPA is concerned about, that the psychologist is required to review those records. Beyond that, I think what they're asking for is just more than what a regulation needs to do. For example, confirmation of receipts of communications. The regulation doesn't need to lay out every single step that DOC is going to take, so long as the regulation does require DOC to review that information and take it into account. The second point that they make is that the term final adjudication isn't defined within the regulation. The regulation itself, though, and also says something to the effect of hopefully they ask attorneys within DOC to take a look at what the court orders say. Well, that will happen because the regulation explicitly requires that the Justice and Public Safety Cabinet Office of Legal Services shall determine whether there has been a final adjudication by a court. So that provision requiring counsel from the Office of Legal Services to look at it and to make a formal determination is already in the regulation. Moreover, the way that DPA discusses the hypothetical where there's been a final adjudication by a state court, but then a habeas petition in federal court, there are other safeguards in place in that type of situation to make sure that if somebody should not be executed because of intellectual disability, that happens. For example, if they are currently before a court, they could ask that court to issue an injunction preventing the execution. So this would not be a situation where the individual would be without recourse if they disagreed with the Justice and Public Safety Cabinet's interpretation of what it means to have a final adjudication. Their third argument is that the proposed amended regulation looks for any document that contains a diagnosis of intellectual disability, but not for any document that indicates the death sentence individual is likely intellectually disabled. But that's just not accurate. If you look at the language that's actually in the regulation, it explicitly says the records shall be reviewed for documentation indicating an intellectual disability. The regulation already takes into account that information might be contained in a variety of different sources, from information submitted by the condemned person and interested third parties to, if you look above in section 4.1, the inmate records, education records, records related to Americans with Disability Act, medical records, and mental health records. So there is a voluminous amount of information that the psychologist would be reviewing in this situation. And so I think it's inaccurate to say that the Department of Corrections psychologists wouldn't be considering all these other types of information. Their fourth argument is that the regulation limits documents indicating intellectual disability that will result in suspension of execution to those that indicate disability under the criteria of various different guidelines. Ultimately, we need to have some sort of definition of what it means to be intellectually disabled. The court case discussed how it could not just be an IQ test, but there have been court cases that say we can use an IQ test to prevent an execution. So for example, somebody's IQ score is below the 75, that it is okay to use the IQ score to prevent an execution. And then with regard to the other three examples, those are scientific bases for determining that somebody is intellectually disabled. And then their fifth argument relates to the insanity provisions. As we stated initially, insanity has not been ruled on before a court. There's no reason to believe that the insanity provisions of our regulations are defective at this point in time.
Thank you for that. Can I make a brief comment, Mr. Chair?
You may.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. That was very helpful. I will say I'm new to this and still trying to wrap my head around it. And of course, it seems like there are a lot of good improvements in this regulation from where we were to try to better protect individuals with intellectual disabilities and make sure that we are constitutionally compliant. I have gathered from my time here, we don't vote on regulations. They didn't go to a committee of jurisdiction for that. But I just want to take the opportunity just to sort of put just a general concern on the record that I hope that as we're moving forward in this process, we will be very cautious to make sure that these regulations really are constitutionally compliant. When we're talking about executing people with intellectual disabilities, I think that's something that we should all want to make sure our regulatory scheme is very robust and very comprehensive. And I know that this committee takes that role very seriously. I still have some more reading to do, I think, to better understand this issue. And I'm really grateful for all of the information you provided. Thank you.
Thank you. And to back that up just a little bit, because this is such an important issue, and this, in general, we allow great latitude in discussing everything having to do with this issue, and we'll take all the time that we need to get this right. For everyone on the committee, just so you know, the letter from the DPA is in your file. You have that in your file. You also have a letter from the Attorney General as well. And here in a minute, we're going to, as a request from the Attorney General, we're going to have that letter read into the record. But before we start with that, just a couple quick questions. Do you guys know approximately how many people are on death row currently? An estimate is okay. I don't need an exact number.
Senator West, I think is approximately in the 20s.
20s, okay. And of those 20, do you know that the person that's been there, what is the amount of time the person's been there, the shortest amount of time? Do you know what that number is?
Sir, I do not know that answer. Okay. I can find out and follow back up.
Is it over 2 years probably or more probably? Is that safe to say?
I think that's safe to say.
Okay, sure. So people who are on death row, all of them have been there a fairly lengthy period of time, whatever that number is. Is it safe to say that the counsel for those people have had ample opportunity to file any court document they can to help their client, and if the court's been open and allowed them to make all those filings and necessary adjustments if they need to?
Senator West, the litigation is still ongoing. There's still an ongoing scheduling order related to discovery and motions practice. So to be able to represent whether their counsel has or has not been able to have ample opportunity to make motions, I think that's beyond the scope of what the Department of Corrections would know.
Okay. But it is safe to say that within a 2 or 3 year period of time, if you have good counsel, let's say, the courts are open and you can file any motion you want in court. Is that correct?
Senator West, certainly counsel can make motions, objections, and carry through with litigation. Whether that's an adequate opportunity or not, that would go beyond the scope of what this regulation is.
Sure. Okay. At this time, I apologize. We did have someone signed up to speak. I didn't know they wanted to speak, but they're going to come forward this time. You can stay where you're at. Mr. Barron, if you would step forward. And through this line of questioning, I saw your head going up and down, side to side. So
sorry about that.
That's okay. Just state your name for the record, and the floor is yours. You can proceed.
Thank you very much, David Barron, and I'm lead counsel for 12 of the, to answer your question, 24 people who are on death row in Kentucky, and have been since the lawsuit was filed in April 2006, running the litigation on the execution procedures case. I wasn't initially planning to speak today. I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to make it today because I was actually in court this morning on this very execution procedures case. And then a member of the committee had a staff member contact me during that proceeding to ask if I could be here to answer any questions.
And for the record, can you state who you're with?
Yes, I'm with the Kentucky Department of Public Advocacy, but I'm not speaking here on behalf of any agency. We represent our individual clients, so I'm here on behalf of the 15 clients that are part of this litigation, and generally as to all 24 that are on the row. And in speaking there, I want to answer every question that the committee has, but I would also like to specifically address some of the things that came up regarding the letter that I submitted on behalf of my clients in the litigation, since representations regarding that had just been made, and I think that need to be clarified. And I also want to talk a little bit about the court proceeding this morning because it's directly relevant to it, because it involved the Attorney General's motion to try to modify an injunction to allow a particular execution to proceed while all this litigation is ongoing regarding the constitutionality of the regulations. And indeed, discussions came up with, and Judge Shepard had asked about the provisions regarding insanity in the regulations. Seemed readily apparent, from my opinion from that not only does the substantial questions that remain need to be resolved before anything can proceed, but it seems readily apparent that Judge Shepard will be declaring, if there aren't changes made to the current regulation that you're considering, will ultimately be striking down the regulation for a third time. I want to remind, because there are new members of the committee, that this is the second time the judge has struck down this particular regulation on the particular same reasoning regarding intellectual disability, previously in 2019. The insanity issues hasn't been ruled upon by the court, in part because there's still ongoing discovery, and therefore we can't file just for judgment on the pleadings on it because there are factual disputes. But the reality is, not only for Mr. Bays, who they are seeking an execution on warrant on right now, issues regarding his competency to be executed, but it's an issue for all the rest of them. So when the Department of Corrections respectfully came in here and said that those matters haven't been acted upon because Judge Shepard hasn't ruled upon it, it's because of the ongoing litigation and part of the positions the Commonwealth through the Attorney General's office and the Department of Corrections has taken that those matters have yet to become adjudicated by the court, but the writing is on the wall on where to go with it. In fact, just to give a couple basic examples of it, they're undergoing the regulatory process right now to require the submission of information from third parties concerning intellectual disability and regarding the ability to consider and requirement to consider information beyond just what's in prison medical records. One of the things I requested during the regulatory process, and that you also see in the letter I submitted to the committee, where I also attached my comments to the Department of Corrections, is they don't have the provision for the submission of information regarding insanity to be considered. It defies logic to allow it to be submitted for information on intellectual disability, but not for insanity, particularly when we already had a judge's ruling on it. So I think we're all trying to move the ongoing litigation towards finality so that we can have assurances for not just my clients, but also for the residents of the Commonwealth, the taxpayers, and even the victims' family members, that an execution is going to be carried out in a constitutional manner. But the committee just passing along this regulation under the auspices that it only deals with intellectual disability because that's all the court ruled upon would be, in my opinion, mistaken, because the entire regulation is for review, and it just seems to delay the inevitable so that we never get to a point of finality in the near future when we've given to the Department of Corrections simple corrections to be made. And then I want to also address another question that the committee chair had asked, and then talk about a few things regarding the representations that were made regarding the letter I submitted on intellectual disability a few moments ago, and of course answer any other questions the committee has now or as it continues to review the regulation. As to new death sentences, the last new death sentence in Kentucky was in 2014. It happened to be somebody who was in prison, and it was a cold hit DNA serial killer case. So as for a crime that recently occurred as opposed to that crime in the 1980s, it's been a very long time since there's been a death sentence imposed in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And as to the questions regarding representation and the attorneys presenting litigation, yes, they all have attorneys, of course, and they're entitled to that through the federal Constitution and through state law. Yet, what wasn't mentioned today is that the Attorney General's office has also taken, in one of my cases, an interlocutory appeal to the Kentucky Supreme Court that is delaying the resolution of an intellectual disability claim after the trial post-conviction court denied a motion to dismiss 2 years ago for individuals that has numerous execution scores that are below 60, and that many of which are in the Department of Corrections records that until this regulation goes into effect, they would not be reviewing. They're arguing in their interlocutory appeal that this execution regulation that the committee is now considering should be the exclusive means for anybody to deal with intellectual disability after trial and direct appeal. So if this goes forward as is, and they win that, which I don't expect they will, then the content of this regulation will become the only means in Kentucky to actually deal with intellectual disability, underscoring the need for everybody to get it right what's in there. And ultimately, of course, then there'll be litigation in the federal court system about whether you can limit it to just in the regulatory process. But I don't think it's understandable the committee would think so, but I don't think it's fair for anybody to have the understanding or representation that because there's counsel to litigate intellectual disability, that this is automatically going to be resolved for everybody, particularly with the position the Attorney General has taken. And then there's another individual who's a plaintiff in this litigation, whom the Fayette County Commonwealth Attorney's Office has taken the position after a second round of litigation on the issue because of a change in governing standards and Kentucky Supreme Court law on it, that he shouldn't be allowed to litigate it again because he already litigated it once. And if that's the case, then the only fail-safe here is this regulation. And I don't want to take up the committee's entire time today, but with regard to 4 things that were mentioned by the Department of Corrections a few moments ago, specific to the comments I wrote and submitted, which, again, are on behalf of my individual clients. The Department of Public Advocacy submits their own aspects here, but this is based on the clients and the context of this litigation that I've been running now for over 19 years. Yes, it has in the regulation a provision that the psychologist is to review the documents that are submitted. It actually has in their provision that if the person who's sentenced to death submits the information him or herself, that there'll be confirmation that it's received and provided to the psychologist for review. I am baffled why there isn't any confirmation for that. The attorneys are required to submit it by email to the warden. We all use email. Things can accidentally end up in spam or junk mail or so on. If there's no if they don't receive it and there's no confirmation of it, we're not talking about the psychologist not reviewing it, but we're not talking about any assurances that the information ever got to them for the psychologist to see. That's a basic requirement, and if they're going to provide that confirmation for things that were submitted somehow by the person sentenced to death, him or herself, there's no reason to not change the regulation to provide confirmation in that angle for when it's submitted by the attorneys or interested third parties, when the court has already required there be a mechanism for the submission of that and review of it. As for the new provision for not reviewing it if there is a final adjudication, part of that came about, frankly, because I suggested to them, because I'm not sitting here as some obstructionist trying to delay things. We are representing our clients to obtain a fair and constitutional manner of execution if executions go forward, that if everything's been dealt with in intellectual disability, there's no point in suspending the execution, and it had no provision to avoid suspending it across the board because I'd have to show up in court and say, we don't have a claim, and therefore we're dismissing that, and we just can't continuously end up in that circular cycle. So that came about partly because of my suggestion. But the problem comes down to, again, the term final adjudication, because yes, the regulation does say it will be looked at by their legal department. Lawyers interpret things very differently at times, and there is not an actual clear-cut definition in the regulation or even in the law for what constitutes finality in that regard. Indeed, I have another case where the Attorney General's office has taken a very different position as to what is final adjudication finality in a death penalty case that I took over in April, and they're arguing the prior attorneys filed it out of time. That itself demonstrates that their attorneys may take a view of that that's very different than everybody else, and could take the view that for the two individuals, for example, right now, who are currently litigating it further after having lost, that they have a final adjudication. Does a Kentucky Supreme Court ruling rejecting the claim constitute a final adjudication? Some attorneys may say yes, but what about the fact that that individual has the claim pending before the Federal Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit? Most would hopefully say no, because that's still out there. But the regulation doesn't provide that clarification. It's ambiguous in that regard at best, when the statutory law prohibits ambiguity in the content of a regulation. We have suggested a very simple solution from the outset on that. And I've one that I think it's pretty clear that Judge Shepard and the Franklin Circuit Court will agree upon if it's not fixed first. They could simply just change it to say that they will conduct a review for anybody who's sentenced to death unless intellectual disability is no longer pending in court, has already been decided by the courts, and there is no change in the clinical definition and guidelines for determining intellectual disability or the governing case law. It's a real simple fix. And then as to the other aspects of what's reviewed within the regulation or not, it still says criteria of AAIDD, the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, the American Psychiatric Association, similar criteria. They're looking for documents that identify intellectual disability based on that. But for any of us who review documents of this nature, particularly in older cases or even older clinical settings, you're almost never going to see any of that criteria mentioned, because they're being evaluated for the purpose of providing them needs assessments and other capacities where the diagnosis isn't critical, or by experts who, of course, apply the governing body of law. No lawyer is going to file a pleading and say, we are filing this pursuant to our knowledge as a lawyer. That's obvious. So you're not going to see the criteria that the regulation suggests is required, and then there's the question of whether they disregard that documents. And also whether they disregard aspects because it doesn't actually define that, doesn't actually specifically state the person is intellectually disabled. But most of what I've seen in my more than 22 years representing death row inmates and litigating intellectual disability in cases for almost my entire career is you'll see things that say consistent with or maybe intellectually disabled. You won't definitely see documents that say a diagnosis of it. So is that disregarded? Is it not disregarded? These are ambiguities and concerns that really need to be answered, that get to the crucial angle of the intellectual disability component of the current aspects of the regulations that have been amended. These are aspects that were already pending in our litigation for years, that we've asked the Department of Corrections for years to fix, and gave them the actual fixes that we'd find fully acceptable. The court hasn't reached those issues yet, but will be reaching those issues. And there's simply no reason to avoid making those changes, which, if they make changes we request, then I obviously have to dismiss those particular claims or subclaims because they did exactly what we asked them to do. And with that, I'd welcome any questions the committee has.
Before we get to those questions, we do have one other gentleman, Mr. Sharkey. If you want to come forward. If one of you two could make room for just a moment for Mr. Sharkey, and thank you. We'll come back to you. Mr. Sharkey, in the interest of time, if you could, green light in 5 minutes, if you could.
I'm going to be very brief.
Please, the floor is yours. Please proceed.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Sharkey. I'm a staff attorney with Kentucky Protection Advocacy. We reviewed the proposed changes to the regulation, and we believe that the committee should find them deficient for many of the reasons that he just mentioned. And I'd just like to specifically note that the regulation requires suspension of the execution if the inmate doesn't know why I think that he is being executed, but it fails to state that that the inmate must also know that the execution will in fact result in death. The Supreme Court requires both, so I don't know. I commented to the DOC that they should add that the inmate understands that execution will indeed result in death, as required by the Supreme Court in Ford versus Wainwright, and then later adopted as controlling in Panetti versus Quarterman. So I think it should be found deficient based on that. And also, the regulation allows for the condemned and interested third parties to submit additional information about the inmate's intellectual disability, but it fails to do so. The same thing about the inmate's sanity. I commented to the DOC that they should add that allow for interested third parties to submit additional information regarding the inmate's sanity, and they responded that the Franklin Circuit Court only ordered them to allow that for persons with developmental disabilities. However, I noted that the Franklin Circuit Court relied on Ford versus Wainwright, which was a case about submitting additional information. In the Circuit Court order, they relied on that, which is a case about submitting additional information about a person's sanity. So I just don't understand why they wouldn't change it to allow for that, since the Franklin Circuit Court based its opinion on a Supreme Court case that said you have to allow for interested third parties to submit additional information regarding a person's sanity. So their response blew my mind, I think. And I think that the committee should find that regulation deficient based on those two aspects and everything that he said.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to open it up briefly for questions. Senator Chambers Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm learning on my first committee meeting that whoever put this on my calendar for 1 hour clearly has some scheduling things to learn. But
this meeting is longer than our record-breaking 19-minute meeting, I think.
I'm not asking you all to opine on what you all might do on behalf of clients or what your agency might do. I just want to clarify what I think I'm hearing. Sir, on the end, could you remind me of your name? David Barron. Barron? Barron, okay. Mr. Barron, based on your professional legal opinion, is it your professional legal opinion that this regulation, if it's passed as it stands now, it is likely to face litigation over its constitutionality, and you feel that that would result in a successful injunction? I guess that's my first question. Is that your professional legal opinion?
I can't answer that with a yes or no because there are some premises in there that would just...
Could you make sure your microphone's on, please?
Sorry. I can't answer that yes or no because, respectfully, there were some premises that were just, I believe, inaccurate. If I could just briefly clarify for you.
Please.
First, the injunction, we're not talking about a new injunction. The injunction's already in place that the Attorney General's office has been trying ad nauseum to unsuccessfully get lifted. So that injunction regarding the implementation of the regulation is in place. It covers the insanity provisions in addition to the intellectual disability provisions. So the question then becomes, as point 2 to answer you, whether this regulation resolves those issues. And it is my firm opinion that they do not in any material manner. And therefore, it's very clear cut that the Franklin Circuit Court will declare this regulation invalid for numerous reasons, even though he only needs to deal with one at a time. So he doesn't have to resolve all of it, just like he hasn't resolved it all at once here, but that the ways the Department of Corrections can fix this so that would not happen, at least as to this provision of the execution protocol, keeping in mind that due to regulatory law, the execution protocol is comprised of 7 total regulations, and this is just one of them, and the others are part of the litigation too. But we've given the Department of Corrections the requested necessary changes. If they made every one of those, I think we'd probably have to withdraw a significant number of the claims, and I wouldn't probably be here speaking in opposition to the regulation. I put that in probabilities because as an attorney and an adjunct law professor, I can't always be certain what words or language they would use. But if they used what we suggested and went about it that exact way, that would eliminate, I would think, all the issues we have on insanity and intellectual disability. And the litigation that's been going on for 19 years, if they adopted a lot of these changes, would have already been significantly streamlined and would be significantly streamlined towards a final resolution. But instead, they've unfortunately chosen to take the approach of a piecemeal aspect where they basically are making changes only when they're ordered to do so. And last time around, after they went through it a couple years ago, I submitted to the committee a letter back then that laid out the exact reason to find it deficient, that once that regulation went into effect, the Franklin Circuit Court adopted that exact aspect. And we're back here now, and I told them back then about the fix to be made, that they could have avoided that one. They could have avoided this one. The years of litigation wouldn't be existing right now if they just took the simple steps we've handed to them on the proverbial silver platter. I'm sorry for the length of that, but I hope that answered your question.
It did. Mr. Chair, would I be pushing my luck if I ask for one more question? I promise it'll be my last.
Please be brief.
Okay. Thank you. Just to, so that did answer my question, that you think that if your proposed changes were adopted, that you think that that would result in the injunction being lifted.
It would, well, can I clarify, not the injunction itself being lifted,
for the part of it.
But this part of the protocol, yes.
Can you just give me an idea of, timeline-wise, how long does it take? I guess this, actually, I'll withdraw the question. It's probably a better question for the agency. I'm just curious about the timeline of how long it takes to promulgate rules, how long litigation takes. I'm just sort of trying to wade through it all, but I'll save that for the department.
I could answer that if you'd like, or if not.
I'll ask it to the people best suited to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could have the cabinet come back up at this time, and we will allow them a brief response and a few more questions from members. Could you please respond to all that? That's as brief as possible, but feel free to take all the time you need. The floor is yours.
Sure. I think big picture, it's important to note that this case has been in litigation for 19 years. The 2010 injunction, that is the one that's controlling right now, we have promulgated new regulations multiple times since then. We have promulgated regulations relating to insanity, and there have been multiple opportunities for the court to make a ruling on that. The ruling that we have before us right now is the one on intellectual disability. We follow the rules of courts and we follow court orders, and we have amended our regulations based on that court order. If at some point in time the court issues a ruling related to insanity, we would of course comply with the court's orders. And if there was an order at that point in time, we could amend so we could address the court's concerns. But as of right now, the court hasn't issued any orders.
Thank you. Any comment? You good? Are you good? Okay. Any questions from members of the committee this time? Okay. Seeing none. Representative Marzian.
It's not really a question. I don't know if we're getting ready to move forward or not, but as one of the, probably the person that's been here forever, the longest, years ago.
It's called institutional knowledge.
We had a bipartisan group working on actually abolishing the death penalty. It was amazing. We had about half Republicans, half Democrats. But we found that it cost $1.6 million more to institute the death penalty than life without parole. And I think that moved a lot of people. Anyway, 23 states have banned the death penalty. And it's usually given more to people of color and poor people. So it's very concerning because I think that this reg would move forward executions of people that are disabled, have intellectual disabilities, and often they can't get the best, they're having public defenders, which are great, but they're overworked, underpaid. So that's my concern there, and I don't know if it's appropriate yet to move that it's deficient, Mr. Chair.
If you would hold that motion.
I will.
We will get there.
I'll do whatever the chair says. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I have been requested to read this letter into the record as committee chair. For everyone's information, there is a letter in your packet from the Office of the Attorney General. There's the letter from the Attorney General, and then there is an attached letter to the governor from Mrs. Lally, whose family was a victim of Mr. Ralph Bays. This time, committee staff will officially read that letter into the record.
Dear Senator West and Representative Lewis, the Attorney General's Office appreciates your subcommittee's prompt consideration of the Department of Corrections amendment to part of its death penalty regulation. Please consider this letter as a comment to provide context about this amendment. Kentucky's death penalty has been mired in delays ever since the Kentucky Supreme Court ruled in 2009 that our execution protocol must be adopted by administrative regulation. That ruling made Kentucky an outlier compared to its sister states. Of the other states whose courts have considered this legal issue, the vast majority have ruled that the state's execution protocol need not be adopted by administrative regulation. When the Kentucky Supreme Court adopted its contrary holding, 2 justices presciently warned that the ruling gives the guilty more time to live, it gives the innocent families of the victims more time to suffer. Since I took office last year, the Attorney General's office has done everything within its authority to change this intolerable status quo. On June 17th of this year, I wrote to Governor Beshear informing him of his obligation to sign a death warrant for Ralph Bays. More than 30 years ago, Mr. Bays callously murdered 2 law enforcement officers in Powell County, Sheriff Steve Bennett and Deputy Sheriff Arthur Briscoe. The family of the victims has written movingly about how the decades-long delay in Mr. Bays' execution has affected them. Lisa Briscoe Lally, the sister of Deputy Sheriff Briscoe and the sister-in-law of Sheriff Bennett, put it this way: I have felt over the past 3 decades that Kentucky officials had forgotten all about how brutally Steve and Arthur were murdered, but hopefully that wrong can be righted in the near future. I urge the subcommittee members to read Mrs. Lally's attached letter to Governor Beshear. To this day, the governor has not responded to Mrs. Lally's letter. Unfortunately, despite his legal obligation to do so, Governor Beshear is refusing to sign a death warrant for Mr. Bays. A big part of his justification is that the regulatory amendment now before this subcommittee is not final. It's important that the record be cleared up on this issue. This subcommittee's consideration of the Department of Corrections amendment has no bearing on whether the governor can legally sign a death warrant for Mr. Bays. That's because the regulatory amendment relates to death row inmates who have an alleged intellectual disability. Throughout several decades of legal challenges to his death sentence, Mr. Bays has never claimed to be intellectually disabled. As a result, this amendment changes nothing with respect to Mr. Bays. The governor should sign a death warrant for Mr. Bays now, as Kentucky law requires. I respectfully request that the subcommittee move this regulatory amendment forward, if only to end the governor's delay tactics and stop him from using legal fictions to hide from his lawful responsibility. I very much appreciate the subcommittee's prompt consideration of the Department of Corrections regulatory amendment. Sincerely, Russell Coleman, Attorney General.
Thank you. As noted, all committee members have a copy of the letter from Mrs. Lally in your folders, and that shall be part of the record today for this committee. The committee will stand at ease for one moment. At this time, the floor is open for any types of motions on this set of regulations in front of the committee.
Now's my time.
Now is your time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and
The floor is yours.
thank you. I also wanted to make note that the Innocence Project has exonerated 200 to 201 death row inhabitants since 1973 that were convicted and not guilty. So I think it's really, we should really move with caution, and I would move that this would be deficient.
We have a motion for deficiency from Representative Marzian. We have a second from Senator Chambers Armstrong. Is there any discussion on the motion for deficiency at this time? Seeing none, the question is on the motion to find the regulation deficient. All those in favor of finding the regulation deficient will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. Please call the roll.
Senator Rocky Adams. Senator Cassie Chambers Armstrong.
May I briefly explain my yes vote, Mr. Chair?
Please proceed.
I vote yes. I really do appreciate what the department is trying to do. I think there are a lot of good steps in this. I'm worried that there are still holes I need to better wrap my head around, and I can't in good conscience when we're dealing with something as permanent as execution until I'm fully satisfied that we're constitutionally compliant. I can't vote to move a regulation forward until I can answer that question for myself. So I vote yes.
Senator Wilson.
No.
Representative Bridges.
No.
Representative Gordon.
No.
Representative Marzian. Co-Chair Lewis.
No.
And Co-Chair West.
No.
We have 5 noes, 2 yeses.
With 5 noes and 2 yeses, motion does not pass for deficiency. The motion to find this regulation deficient has failed. That being the end of this segment, I think we gave this a pretty thorough hearing. Please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Department of Criminal Justice Training 503 KAR 3010. This regulation has staff suggested amendments.
This regulation is being amended to reorganize sections to make the requirements, procedures, and penalties more concise and easier to reference. The amended after comments version adds a section for oral reports, and the staff amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
I'm Chip White. I'm the Assistant Director of the Training Division at the Department of Criminal Justice Training.
Nathan Goins, Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, Assistant General Counsel.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. Any questions for these gentlemen on this set of regulations? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Education and Labor Cabinet, Department for Libraries and Archives, 725 KAR 1050. This regulation has staff suggested amendments.
725 KAR 1050 specifies categories eligible to receive funding, changes the grant award period from annual to quarterly, and includes application submission date requirements, changes the appeal process from 3 to 5 days, and gives the commissioner 5 days instead of 2 to make a decision, establishes that the decision of the State Libraries, Archives, and Records Commission shall not be overturned unless there is clear and convincing evidence of a violation, establishes that a failure to fulfill a grant contract may result in the return of grant funds and impact future funding considerations, and amends material incorporated by reference to make extensive substantial amendments. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and updates a date on incorporated material for consistency with the administrative regulation.
Please state your name for the record.
Dondra Meredith, Deputy General Counsel, Education and Labor Cabinet.
Rusty Heckerman, Kentucky State Archivist with the Education and Labor Cabinet.
Drew Preston, the Manager for Local Records Branch of the KDLA.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendment? There's a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. The order of the meeting today did not work in your favor. Thanks for coming. Do we have any questions from members today? Seeing none, please call next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Department for Public Health, 902 KAR 100130. This regulation has staff suggested amendments.
902 KR 10130 amends to revise requirements for shielding the patient during X-ray procedures, add requirements for handheld X-ray devices, add procedures to protect members of the public from exposure, add the option for a dental office to use a qualified expert for guidance, and cite to applicable federal law for additional safety requirements. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Julie Brooks, Policy Specialist with the Department for Public Health.
Ashley Marshall, Supervisor over the Radiation Producing Machine section.
Brian Parsley, Radiation Health Specialist, Department for Public Health.
Thank you so much. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, so ordered. Any questions from members for this set of on this set of regulations? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please call the final regulation of the day.
Department for Medicaid Services, 907 KAR 1023, 1065, 3062, 8020, 8040, 10016, and 15022. Regulation 907 KAR 1065 has agency and staff suggested amendments, and regulations 907 KAR 8020 and 8040 have staff suggested amendments.
907 KR 1023 amends to reflect a change in the current Medicaid state plan that transitions ancillary services to a per diem payment instead of a separate reimbursement. 907 KR 1065 amends to add imaging services as an ancillary service along with existing X-rays, updates dollar amounts for reimbursements and effective date of reimbursement adjustments to match the current year, updates patient-driven payment models, reimbursement methodology, adds an allowance for resident to be charged for their representative's qualified request along with their own, provide a specific fee schedule for oxygen therapy procedures separate from ancillary services, require ancillary services to be reported to the state on a specific document to determine the payments, establish a quality add-on component for per diem rates, which uses quality measures to determine increased reimbursement rates, and incorporate by reference the new fee schedule and metrics. The agency amendment amends Section 73C1 on the validation of MDS data to require the department to generate a stratified random sample consisting of the greater of 30% of the Medicaid residents or 15 MDS assessments in a price-based NF, and amends Section 732 to require the department to review a minimum of 15 MDS assessments from the sample referenced in Section 73C1. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. 907 KR 3062 establishes a supplemental payment program for qualifying ground-based emergency medical transportation pursuant to House Bill 152 from the 2025 regular session.
907, 8020, and 8040 are being amended to limit prior authorization by the department to only therapy visits that exceed the limits established in the regulation unless there is a higher contractual limit established between the provider and the managed care organization, to list diagnoses not subject to the 20-visit limit, and to change the date of service signature requirement to require that a health record is signed and dated within 72 hours of service. The staff amendments amend various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A. 907, 10016 is being amended to establish policies to allow out-of-state hospitals to provide care to Kentucky Medicaid recipients and to allow for greater participation by contiguous states and more limited participation by non-contiguous states. 907-15022 is being amended to allow temporarily certified drug and alcohol counselors to continue performing their duties within a narcotic treatment program without possessing a permanent license to perform those duties, as opposed to the current 3-year limit on this activity.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Good afternoon. Jonathan Scott, DMS, Regulatory and Legislative Advisor.
Justin Derringer, Director, Division of Healthcare Policy, Department for Medicaid Services.
Thank you so much. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? Thank you, Senator Wilson. With Representative Frazier Gordon gone, I didn't know if we were going to be able to make it. We have a motion and a second without objection. So ordered. There is also an agency amendment. Are there any questions or discussion on the agency amendment? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval of the agency amendment? We have a motion and a second without objection. So ordered. I know we're at the end of the meeting and everybody's ready to shut this thing down, but I do have a question on, it is 907 KAR 1023, the nursing facilities. We've had quite a few questions on that particular reg. Could you briefly get into the weeds on that and kind of tell us what's happening in more detail there?
Sure. So 907KR 1065, which is the next reg, is the one that's kind of expanding to encompass what is currently 1023. And so going forward, ancillary services are going to be paid as a per diem and part of the general global fee that is paid to a nursing home. So they're paid a per diem rate per bed. And so the ancillary services are going to be rolled into that going forward. And so the 1065 is just a set of changes that is being made to a lot of the way that we do nursing facilities, nursing facility payments. There's going to be a quality payment going forward, and that's so that's basically what's happening. The language in 1023 also says medically necessary. So what you're seeing in 1023 is a little bit antiquated. Honestly, we had a lot of forms, a lot of paperwork, a lot of the things that you're seeing that's coming out, and we're covering it by saying it's medically necessary. We had briefly considered actually completely repealing 1023 because ancillary services are just going to be functioning as a part of the nursing home per diem payment process going forward. But we decided to leave it in there just so there would kind of be a definition and a concept of what an ancillary service is, but the payment function is more appropriately covered in 1065 going forward.
So I'm sure this is not the right word, but for our purposes today, as a lay person, so what had previously been more of an a la carte style payment method, you're rolling into a value meal,
yes,
type situation. Yep. So as is all of these situations, right, that we deal with in these areas, it's about the money, right? And so some of these questions are going to be, the obvious question for me is if I'm a provider, am I going to be able to get the same amount of money for the services provided? So, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm not on health and welfare. Could you go into that briefly?
So my understanding is yes, the money will be similar, if not actually a little bit greater, just as the quality improvement program, as the quality payment program rolls into that, and we have shared this regulation and our concepts around it, where we were moving it from the supplemental a la carte style into a per diem payment function. We have been doing this work, fully looping in a group of nonprofits, for-profits, faith-based, just the full group of the full industry representation. Their heads of industry have been participating in a ongoing call, ongoing access to all these documents as we've been writing them. And as we've sought federal approval, and this has been I think a 2 or 3 year ongoing process as we've been getting these ready to go out the door and finally here.
I got one final question, then I'll open it up to committee. So I know this is a loaded question, but so you don't anticipate as we get into session the industry leaders coming in and pushing back greatly on this, or
to my understanding,
from a payment perspective?
To my understanding, this is a wanted change.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any questions from committee members? Seeing none, that concludes the regulations for today. Thank you so much. We need to discuss next meeting.
The next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Monday, January 12th, 2026 at 1 p.m. here in 149.
Does anybody have a conflict with that time, January 12th at 1 p.m.? Theoretically, we'll all be here. Yeah, it's time to come back. So, seeing none, this meeting, Chair Lewis has a comment.
Just want to say we appreciate all the staff here, everything you do. Thought we had a good year. No deficiencies yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you for the cookies, committee staff. Really appreciate it.
As you can see, I enjoyed several of them.
This meeting is adjourned.